Shalom, family. This is Brother Daryl, and welcome to another episode of False Doctrine Exposed. Today, we'll be dismantling the 12 tribes chart that is being used by these alphabet camps to identify the children of Israel. Quick history lesson on this chart. A dude named Ariyah out of the One West camp claims to have had a magical dream where this chart was revealed to him. We'll demonstrate that this chart doesn't line up with the scriptures or with secular history. Now, I already know that you alphabet campers will continue to believe in the doctrines of lying false prophets. That's what you guys do. You worship and readily follow men. Personally, I'll trust in the scriptures, which clearly reveal the locations of where the 12 tribes will be gathered from in the last days. So we're going to get right into the scripture that destroys this chart, and then we'll break it all down from there. Let's get to work, family. Isaiah chapter 11, verses 11 through 12. And it shall come to pass in that day that Yahweh shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pathros and from Cush and from Elam and from Shinar and from Hamath and from the islands of the sea. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Verse 11 covers the locations where the northern tribes were scattered due to the Assyrian captivity. And we're going to go through these areas on the maps to gain proper understanding of exactly where they are. Spoiler alert. These locations are throughout Africa as well as the so-called Middle East, not in the New World. Quick note on verse 12. We already know that the house of Judah, composed of the three southern tribes, was scattered to the four corners of the earth in fulfillment of Luke chapter 21, verse 24. The transatlantic slave trade speaks very well for itself. So we'll be focusing on the locations of the northern tribes that are again covered by verse 11. The northern tribes will be gathered in part from Assyria, and this map represents the bounds of the Assyrian Empire in 650 BC. This area primarily encompasses Syria and Iraq. This is a picture of so-called Afro-Iraqis. These are clearly Negroes, and they're exactly where they're supposed to be according to the prophecy. Isaiah 11:11 also mentioned Pathros, which is Upper Egypt. We're still there, and we're still blending in with the indigenous Hamites too. Cush is simply Ethiopia. No mystery there. Even the fake Jews in Israel acknowledge our brothers from Ethiopia. They call themselves Beta Israel. The indigenous Ethiopians, however, call them Falasha, which means landless or wanderers. These Israelites claim descent from Menelik I, who is the son of King Solomon and Queen Sheba. Elam is in modern-day Iran. Our people are all over Iran. See the gentleman leaning up against the car? Now you know you have an Uncle Leroy that looks just like this dude. Let's keep it real, family. Our people will also be gathered from the plains of Shinar. This is a specific region within modern-day Iraq. If you recall, this is where Nimrod the Cushite built the Tower of Babel. We're right there. This is an Israelite living in the city of Basra. You can find the remnant of our northern tribesmen all over these areas. It's not a mystery. Hamath is a city in Syria, and there's certainly a remnant of our people who will be regathered from there. I'd like to move on to a slightly more controversial topic. That topic being the last portion of the verse in Isaiah 11:11, which makes mention of our brethren who will be regathered from the islands of the sea. This is referring to the Mediterranean Sea. Now let's think about this logically. Israel is located right on the Mediterranean, and our people had several colonies throughout northern Africa due to the dispersion. The Bible specifically mentions Simon of Cyrene, who was compelled to assist Yeshua in the carrying of the stake of his crucifixion. Well, Cyrene is modern-day Libya. We always have had a strong presence in the Mediterranean as a people, and throughout our history, we have scattered to various islands throughout the area. Cyprus, in particular, has a history of slave trading under the Ottoman Empire. This is Melis Redif, a sprinter, a so-called Turkish Cypriot. Melis is a native of northern Cyprus. She probably looks familiar to you. Our people are literally everywhere, including the islands of the Mediterranean, just like the prophecy indicates. Let's move forward. Sicily has an interesting history. It's located right there next to Italy. It looks like the little rock that the boot of Italy is kicking. It's very telling, by the way. Now, from 900 to 1100 AD, it was ruled by the Moors. Many of these so-called Moors were in fact Israelites. While I'm pretty sure that many people would debate me on this topic, you can look into the so-called Marranos of Spain and learn the truth. They were Israelites who practiced Islam. They also left quite a mark on Sicily. Our ancestors would have called these folks Mamzers, half-breeds. Sicilians have a history of being looked down upon by mainland Italians. Gee, I wonder why. Another key precept in understanding where the northern tribes are located lies in Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 10. From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering. The word suppliants simply means servant. Don't let the fancy language fool you, family. Now, beyond the rivers of Ethiopia refers to the interiors of Africa. 2nd Esdras chapter 13, verses 40 through 45. Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hoshea the king, whom Salmanasar, the king of Assyria, led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. But they took this counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into Euphrates by the narrow places of the river, for the Most High then showed signs for them and held still the flood till they passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Arsareth. Notice that these verses make no mention of them building ships and sailing across the sea. However, alphabet campers will try to add that to the script. Negative. We're about to go ahead and jump right into the nail in the coffin from Rudolph Windsor. A lot of you campers have this book on your shelves, but I see that you clearly haven't actually read much of it. Do yourself a favor and go ahead and turn to page 92. In the 9th century, a black African Hebrew arrived in the city of Kairouan in Algeria. In this city was one of the famous Talmudic schools. The name of this Hebrew was Eldad the Danite. He told a credible or believable story of a Hebrew empire south of the Sahara in the western Sudan. According to Eldad the Danite, the Hebrews in the interior of Africa spoke a Phoenician Hebraic language mixed with Arabic. They had a religion which had come down from Moses and a Hebrew emperor. It was believed that this emperor was named Tlutan or Balutan. Eldad said that the people of this tribe had fled from the kingdom of Israel, the northern tribes, after Sennacherib the Assyrian had subdued it, and that other Israelite tribes such as Naphtali, Gad, and Asher were in the land from which he came. Do you catch that? Eldad the Danite literally tells you that the northern tribes are in the interiors of Africa, not in the Americas. Let Ariah tell it though. Now, if you know anything about the Limba tribe of South Africa, then you'll know that their oral history tells the story of them fleeing the Assyrian captivity and migrating down to Yemen and ultimately to South Africa before settling there. In other words, the Limba are descendants of the northern tribes, the house of Israel. These scholarly accounts cast a lot of doubt on the validity of this 12 tribes chart. It's definitely starting to look like some nonsense that an overly stimulated camp leader made up to impress his followers. Or maybe he had what Brother Jacob over in the STL might call a ragu vision. I think it's time to drop it, guys. The Judeans, or Jews, who fled into West Africa after the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD were a combination of three tribes, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. To argue that each tribe was separated out and sent to a specific geographical location in the Americas is very ignorant. The slavers didn't stop and ask each slave, "I say, what tribe are you from?" before loading them onto a boat. That's nonsense. And you look extremely ignorant when you push this chart. The Jews of West Africa were loaded onto slave ships, and they were cast out into the four corners in fulfillment of the prophecy in the Song of Moses. The Song of Moses, Deuteronomy 32, verse 26. I said I would scatter them into corners. I would make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. And this dovetails with Isaiah 11 and 12, which reads, "And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth." Only the house of Judah, the southern kingdom, was scattered to the four corners. This is further confirmed by a third prophecy which was pronounced by the Messiah himself. Luke chapter 21 verse 24. "And they, being the Judeans, shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled." Only the Jews were led away captive into all nations. The northern tribes had already been scattered into all of the regions mentioned in Isaiah 11 and 11. That's why only the house of Judah will be regathered from the four corners. All of the so-called Negroes that stepped onto those slave ships came from an admixture of the three Judean tribes who had made a home in West Africa after Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD. American Negroes are of the Judean tribes. We're a mixture of the three southern tribes, and you don't know whether you are from Judah, Benjamin, or Levi, so stop pretending like you do. Our brothers in Jamaica are in the exact same boat. Pun intended. Haitians are Jews. There is no way you could possibly know that their bloodlines are limited solely to the tribe of Levi. You're all just parroting Aria's crazy doctrine. The truth is, there are Israelites in Puerto Rico. However, they are the Afro-Puerto Ricans, and they're Jews, descendants of the transatlantic slave trade. They're not Ephraimites. Here's a very inconvenient factoid for your little 12 tribes chart. Over 75% of Puerto Ricans self-identify as white. So according to your absurd camp doctrines, which say that the so-called white man is Esau, you have Esau right here in your camp claiming to be Ephraim. Do you have any idea how ignorant you campers sound? Esau isn't white, by the way. The kingdom of Edom is in Arabia, which is immediately south of the kingdom of Judea. Secondly, white Puerto Ricans are not Israelites. Only the Afro-Puerto Ricans are, and they aren't from the tribe of Ephraim. They're from the southern tribes. They're the Jews who were shipped all over the world as slaves. Cubans are not from the tribe of Manasseh. In fact, Cubans self-identify as being over 60% white European. Looks like most of the Cubans in your camp are Esau too, huh? Moreover, the white Cubans look down on the Afro-Cubans and are very well known for their systematic discrimination against them. Why? Because the Afro-Cubans are Jews and the descendants of the slave trade. The reproach of Deuteronomy 28:37 is upon them and not the white Cubans. Wake up. It's the same story in the Dominican Republic. The only Israelites in the Dominican Republic are the so-called Afro-Dominicans. They're not of the tribe of Simeon. They're Jews, the same Jews that were sent out all around the world as, you guessed it, slaves. Rinse and repeat with the Guatemalans. The Afro-Guatemalans are not of the tribe of Zebulun. They're Jews. The native tribes of the South Americas are not Israelites. They have no history of keeping the laws, statutes, and commandments. This is readily apparent when you look into their history. See the facial tattoos on this woman? That's a clear violation of Leviticus 19:28. According to 2nd Esdras 13 and 42, the scattered northern tribes would be keeping the laws until the last days. You know, like the Limba in South Africa do. The native tribes in South America are heathens, not Israelites. Only ignorant people believe in these silly 12 tribes charts. Let's continue. There are Mexican Israelites. However, they are descendants of the house of Judah and not the tribe of Issachar. They're Negroes, and they are resented by the native Mexicans. That's an ongoing theme, isn't it? Many of the true Israelites in Mexico were led out of slavery by a man named Gaspar Yanga, whom a city in the state of Veracruz is named after. Quick shout out to David Heredia. Check out his animated series called Heroes of Color. He covers the exploits of Gaspar Yanga, and he does so very well. Now, according to the 12 tribes chart, the Aztecs are of the 12 tribes. Well, how does that work? They have a particularly well-known history of bloody human sacrifice to pagan gods in the New World. Absolutely zero history of keeping the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High. Your chart is only fooling the ignorant. In conclusion, all 12 tribes are black. Israel consists only of the so-called Negroes. Yeah, we have some folks like the Sicilians who have mixed blood, but they're still ours. And at this stage in the game, we even know what our DNA is. If you want to remain ignorant, remain ignorant. But the truth is staring you right in the face. Thanks for your time, family, and all praises to the Most High and great glory to Yahshua, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I'll see you on the next video. Shalom.